Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Empowering Musicians podcast. I am your host, Michael Manley, and the founder of Empowering Musicians. And today's show is called Occam's Razor, or Cutting to the Heart of Efficient Progress. Now, usually, if you've checked out my show before, you've probably seen me talking a lot about things that don't involve my instrument or specific study of a performing arts skill. And the reason why I don't focus on that is because there are so many other resources for that in the world. And that is the primary focus of students as they're learning in college. And my feeling was there was a lot of extra skill-based work and study that needed to happen to really build a successful career and design a successful career. And so a lot of my work focuses on careers, mindset, and everything that doesn't involve practicing our niche performance discipline. In my case, it's the French horn. It might be for you acting or playing the violin or dance or composing. Whatever that is, normally I'm not looking at those things, right? Today, I'm doing the opposite. I am focusing on how we learn and teach those niche skills. And the reason why I was moved to look at this, knowing that there was thousands of other resources out there, was because I found that my instrument horn had not a lot of great content for very, very early stages of learning when we're first learning an instrument. So in the string world, they have something called the Suzuki method, where everybody plays, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star over and over again for days. And it is a very methodical way to teach beginners how to play the violin or how to play a string instrument. And it's very successful. We don't really have anything like that in the world of brass playing. And so I was moved to look into this particular area for a couple reasons. First is I began teaching years ago, about 10 years ago or more now, in the Nevada public school system as a coach, and was working with middle school students, and realized that all of the texts and all of the method books that are available for students are really designed to have them play something together as a group very quickly. So in our world, that meant playing lots of short notes repeatedly. And I was wondering why these students didn't understand how to blow or how to sustain a sound or how to get from one note to the other with the air, which in our world is key. So I was like, why aren't these students why don't they have these really basic things down? And I realized it was because all the method books were teaching everything kind of in the wrong order or not teaching them at all. So that was one thing that really motivated me. And my other reason for wanting to do this had to do with my own experience, which I've talked about in other episodes, where I was mugged back in 1989, which is like a lifetime ago. And my jaw was rearranged, my teeth were rearranged, my jaw was broken in 3 places, and I had to relearn how to play from scratch. And then years later, as a kind of a ripple effect from that injury, I had to relearn how to play with braces on. And so I became this kind of expert in these first stages of learning, right? How do we actually learn? What are the building blocks that we need? What is the order, especially, that we need to learn things in? And how do I break this down? Because I at the time when I had braces on, I actually had about 5 weeks off of work. And then I had to go back to work. And I was like, well, how am I going to do this if I don't have a way to play, right? So I had to quickly regroup and figure it out. So again, my own experiences learning, relearning, and recovering, and my experience teaching made me really think about how I want to focus in my own work on this niche, right? which is specifically beginners, returners, recoverers, and equally importantly, those who teach them. So if you are a teacher and you're struggling with your beginning horn students in middle school, I'm working on a text right now that I hope will be a really great resource for all of those groups of people on my instrument, right, the French horn. So where does Occam's razor fit into all of this? Occam's razor dates back to I don't know, a 14th century philosopher and scholar, and it has been kind of like, originally it was in the scientific method, and it was the idea that the simplest explanation is probably the correct one, right? The fewer hypotheses and the fewer theorems that we have, the more closer to the truth we probably become. And this has kind of been morphed into performance as the less amount of effort we can put in for the maximum amount of result is probably a good path to go on. So what is the least amount of effort we can put in to get the maximum result? Excuse me. There's a great kind of crazy guy, but his really interesting author named Tim Ferriss. He looks at this from a couple different viewpoints. And his first book, which was a huge success, was called The 4-Hour Workweek. And he was running a supplement and nutrition company in which he claimed, and then wrote a book about how he did it, that he worked literally 4 clock hours. So 4 hours of time total in a 7-day period, and was able to run his business. And it was very radical at the time, because people thought, okay, you know, you've got to go and you got to work 8 hours a day. And even at the end of the 8 hours, you don't feel like you have anything done. So he wrote this book on efficiency, right? On time management efficiency. He then wrote another book where he applied the same Occam's razor approach to fitness, right? And athletic performance. So that was interesting too. That book is called 4-Hour Body. And then even after that, later he wrote a book on food and cooking called The 4-Hour Chef. I haven't checked out that one yet. I'm really curious about it. But again, very, very much about efficiency, kind of a very focused, almost insane focus on this, right? But it got me thinking again about how, as musicians, we can apply the same principles to how we perform and how we play. And a lot of us, you know, are used to, especially if you're younger, right? You're in college and you're used to the luxury of having maybe 4 or 5 hours a day to practice. And when you get into the real world, you know, maybe you're on a gig and you're on tour and you're playing, I don't know, My Fair Lady every day, but you want to take a violin audition, and you're not going to have the luxury of 4 hours of practice to prepare. So even as we're more advanced, we can look at this idea of efficiency and how we prepare. And my focus is on how we apply those principles to the very, very beginning stages of learning. And so for me, I was forced, again, through my experience of having to relearn and recover and adapt, to look at my instrument and focus on the most basic elements, right? So first we have air, and we have how we get the air inside us and how we get air outside. So air intake and air release. And then we have this vibration, right, that happens at the lips. And then the next thing we have is we have an amplification of that vibration through the mouthpiece. Looks like this, right, if you're watching. And then we have a sound, right? So we have 4 steps to go before we even get to one sound. And then we have to get different sounds to come out. And we have to build a range of those sounds. And then we have to shape those sounds and create different articulations for those sounds. How we start and connect and shape those notes. The last thing we have is these areas of refinement: timbre, volume, phrasing, and all of those things. A A lot of the method books would start with one, two notes that are tongued together. Often they would start on, for me, for our instrument, rather, they would start on F. They might start on G. Some start on E. There's no rhyme or reason to why these notes are selected, right? So my method is really based on getting from one note to the other and starting at the very, very middle of the instrument, which is a written C or concert F, and using what's called the harmonic series to slur from note to note. The harmonic series slurring exercises are countless. They're out there, but my unique, I think, twist is using them as a way to teach the French horn. So again, the order is important. And if we don't know how to take a good breath, if we don't know how to blow, if we don't know how to buzz here, we're not going to be able to get further. It's like when you're making a cake, the first step is not to get out the frosting, right, and start frosting the flour. You have to bake the cake first. So this is what I'm really focused on, and I am working on a method book because, again, I work with students all the time, and I just find that there's not a lot of great pedagogy out there for, again, raw beginners or returners or recoverers and those who teach them. So one of the things other than that is related to Occam's razor is this idea of undoing or not doing. And so for me, again, if I just think about making a sound on my mouthpiece, which is looks like this, I'm just gonna take a breath and I'm gonna release air. The air is gonna create a vibration, and the vibration is gonna be amplified here. And in my experience, there was a lot of, as an eager student, I wanted to do a lot. And this is not uncommon, right? We're really excited to learn, and we want to figure out what more can I do? What more can I do? And so certain teachers would talk about setting the face, and a lot of tension here. I just talked with another colleague who mentioned studying at a camp with a European who said, well, Herman Bauman always had a flat chin, so you've got to make sure, and there's a lot of effort that happens at the face. And so there's like a setting that happens. And then my other teacher would talk about, tightness in the stomach and articulating from the gut. And all of that, most of it is unnecessary, right? All of it I let go of. There are times when we want to engage those muscles, and we want to make sure that we train our muscles to do that. But for the most part, there's a lot of teaching that involves extra effort out there. And I found that I literally had to learn how to go on a tour, very demanding horn parts, and just a workout every time we played the show. And if you tried to play with that kind of extra tension or extra effort, it would have just caused a lot of injury. It probably would have, really destroyed my playing. So I really, out of necessity, had to learn how to be efficient. One of my favorite stories about my time on tour involved an Alexander technique teacher named Barbara Conable, who then went on to found something called body mapping, which I love. I actually had Stephen Kaplan on a show last year to talk about body mapping for a long time. And he's great. And I'm just going to pick up my horn to show you what I was doing. I had a lot of pain in my right hand, and it was a lot of stiffness, and it had been going on for weeks. I didn't know what was causing it. And I was, playing my horn and supporting my horn off my leg like this with my hand in the bell. And so I went to Barbara. I happened to be coming through a town where she was working, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to fix this hand problem. Got this arm pain. I've got all this stuff happening. And all she did was she said, show me what you do. And I showed her that I was doing this. And she said, stop tensing your hand. So before my hand made it to the bell, she realized that instead of just doing this, I was doing this, right? So I was clenching my hand before I was putting it in the bell, and that was causing me all the problems. So again, the simplest thing to let go of turned out to instantly solve a chronic pain issue for me. So as you're thinking about learning, I would focus on three basic things. And this goes for beginners as well as advanced, right, learners. So seek outside your niche and field. I mentioned Barbara Conable. I've learned so much more in some ways from other musicians and other practitioners about my body and about playing than I have in some ways horn players, right? I've learned a ton from my horn teachers as well, but going outside that niche can be so freeing and so illuminating. The other thing I would say is don't be afraid of change and experimentation. So, fun story, this mouthpiece that I just buzzed on, I have had for 2 weeks. I was in Chicago, was able to pick this mouthpiece up from Jan Balu, who makes mouthpieces. And I had been playing on an older mouthpiece and wasn't really feeling like it was the perfect fit for me anymore and wanted something new. Luckily tried out 3 of his mouthpieces in 3 different sizes blindly and came up with this one. So even at my stage, I'm still experimenting, right? I'm still trying new things. And I think this is really important to not be afraid of change and experimentation, right? And to always feel that the freedom to do that. When I was working many panicked hours of practice, right? So going back to this moment, I'm going to take you back there with me. So I'm playing the show called Miss Saigon on tour. And I realized that like, it's a hard show. It's a very demanding show physically. It's not that. There's a lot of really, really intricate playing or exposed playing. It's just a matter of what we call like music by the pound, right? It was just a lot of notes. And I had to relearn, and I had about 5 weeks. And I said, well, I've got 5 weeks to figure this out. I have all this metal in my mouth now. What am I going to do? And so there is a phrase that I'd come across, which relates to Darwinism, right? And the survival of species, right? And it is adapt, migrate, or perish. So as I'm working through these early frustrating days of practice with a mouthful of metal, I'm at first trying to make everything feel like it used to. And I'm using all of the tools that I'm used to. And I realize, okay, this isn't working. So I have to open myself up to a new feel, a new method, something that's going to be very, very different. Maybe it's the way the mouthpiece is placed on my lips. Something's going to be very different here. And I just have to accept that. And I have to lean into that. So seek outside your niche and field. Don't be afraid of change and experimentation. Remember, adapt, migrate, or perish. And then the last thing is, of course, this concept of Occam's razor. What is the least that I can do for the maximum amount of effort? Is this effort necessary? One of my favorite theater stories comes from a conductor who was touring with another show called Les Mis and told this story. It became kind of an industry kind of joke in a way, but a real story, right? Where he was conducting Les Mis in Detroit, I believe it was. And he was very symphonic score, almost very operatic-like writing. And, was working on a section to get a certain phrasing happening. And one of the horn players just raised his hand and said, is all this nuance really necessary? And so I would not apply that to nuance, but I would ask yourselves to think about, is all this effort really necessary? So is all this what I've been taught as far as what to do with my face or what to do with my stomach? Is it necessary? Question it. Because often I would say most of the time, again, the simplest path is probably the correct one. So I'm really excited to be working on this project for new learners of the French horn and returners and recoverers and those who teach them. And I'm really hoping to get that project finished soon. I'm writing this book now, and it's going to end up I think, taking me a few months, but I'm really determined to finish it because I just feel like it's a niche that isn't really being filled right now. I do want to spend my last minute here just plugging the Desert Winds. We are giving a concert. If you do live in Las Vegas and you want to check us out, we're doing a really great concert of anime and video game music this Saturday, which is today, at 7:30 down at the Pinecrest campus in Henderson. My wonderful colleague Chuck McGuire is conducting us. He's been a guest on our show, and I'm really excited for that concert. It's going to be a great one. So until next week, I look forward to seeing you all again soon, and take care. Bye-bye.